bridges rare disease patients, medical professionals, and the public to foster understanding, connection, and hope. I'm your host, Joanna, and in today's episode features an inspiring guest, Rori, the Vice President of the Superficial Siderosis Research Alliance, or SSRA. Superficial siderosis is a progressive and often misunderstood condition, and Rori is here to help us unravel the complexities. We'll explore its causes, symptoms, and why it can be so challenging to diagnose. We'll also discuss chelation therapy and its dietary considerations, along with vital advocacy and research work the SSRA is doing to support patients around the world. Before we dive in, a quick disclaimer. The information shared in this podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be medical advice, and please always consult your healthcare professional before making any changes to your treatment or care plan. Now let's get started with this important conversation. Welcome, Rori, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Joanna. Thank you for inviting me. Superficial siderosis is really a rare progressive neurodegenerative disorder that results from neural tissue in the brain and the spine being exposed to iron molecules. Over time, blood cells degrade and they release free iron into the system. And free iron is very toxic to neural tissue. Oxidative stress takes a tremendous toll on different areas. And over time, the cells go from not working quite right, degrading, and then they just stop working. While iron is essential to our health and our general well-being, it's especially dangerous in areas like the brain. The brain has a special way to dispose of iron cells, bleeding. If you have a head injury and you have blood in your brain, our bodies are made to handle that. We've got a little cleanup crew called microglia cells that come in for you and I, and they scoop up these old cells, and it's excreted as waste over time as we heal. For some reason, a certain part of the population, when there's excessive bleeding and blood cells breaking down, their bodies can't remove this iron. And this is where we call it our little Pac-Man. They're ferritin protein molecules. Your body secretes them in a neuroprotective manner. And it's like Pac-Man, comes across through the bloodstream, through the tissue, and it covers the free iron cells. And together, that molecule then becomes known as hemocydrin. Mm-hmm. Hemocydrin is the substance that when you bruise your arm or your leg, that's what makes it look purple. You've got hemocydrin built up there because your body sent all these ferritin proteins to get rid of the blood products. Mm-hmm. Well, hemocydrin is really sticky. And when it's floating around the spinal fluid, it circulates up and down your spine, all through the cisterns in your brain, all around your brainstem, in all the little caverns where cranial nerves are. And gravity kind of causes that hemocydrin to fall, and it sticks to the tissue. And over the course of sometimes as long as 30 years after a traumatic event, this hemocydrin builds up all over. And we're not sure why, because hemocydrin is supposed to be neuroprotective to the brain. But for some reason, there's either it's breaking down, but free iron is still being released. And oftentimes people still have tiny active bleeds in their system. So new fresh blood products are still being entered in. It's just a really strange disease. Mm-hmm. Eventually, some people's systems are just overwhelmed and their tissue can't handle it. And these are the superficial siderosis patients.
So how does it differ from MS?
MS has a completely different. This is the only thing that causes damage in superficial siderosis is this blood infiltration. There's no genetic component so far that we know of. We are looking into that, but it's a simple process of just oxidative stress. If we could figure out why some people are susceptible to it, if we could figure out how to stop it from occurring, we would be 10 steps ahead. But the same researcher that we have for superficial siderosis also does uh, a specialized type of MS research also. And he has made it very clear that it's very two different conditions. The symptoms that superficial siderosis bring on are progressive hearing loss, balance and gait issues, bowel and bladder dysfunction, and as it progresses, in some cases, depending on where the iron is located, cognitive issues. Some people lose their sense of smell. Some people have nystagmus. Their eyes are bouncing all the time, bouncing, bouncing, bouncing. They can't see. Sometimes as it progresses down the spine, it becomes almost like a spinal cord injury. They start to suffer neuropathy, shooting pains radiating out from their spinal cords. Down their legs, they get peripheral neuropathy. And then when that happens, that's usually when the bowel and bladder become involved also. It's just like being in a wheelchair, from a accident or injury. Speech difficulties. My husband has developed a speech difficulty. We took him to a speech therapist that he sees for swallow and choking problems because I was concerned his nerves were not working correctly for his speech. And she determined that it's not anything mechanically wrong with him. It's because he's deaf now. My husband has completely lost all of his hearing. And so he's developing that speech where he's not hearing himself speak, so it's becoming unclear. So it's kind of garbled and muffled. I was a little bit relieved to find out that it really wasn't, there wasn't a physical reason for it.
Yeah. How do you communicate with him then?
We use an iPad and an iPhone with a text to talk app. It's the only way we have. We speak and it writes out everything that we're saying. He can't take a phone call anymore. He gets all of his phone calls through FaceTime, and then we have the caption added automatically. Without caption, he can't watch TV, watch a movie, anything. So it started out in 2003 with just tinnitus and strange little bits of hearing loss. We'd go to an ENT, we'd have tests run, they'd do hearing tests on him, and they knew his hearing was getting worse, but they really couldn't pinpoint why. Then he started having strange phantom odors. He would smell things that weren't there. We went to a foundry one time where they were showing blacksmithing, and he said he smelled the foundry for the next 2 months. So that's just a sign of the slow degeneration of the nerves, the cranial nerves. Eventually, he lost his sense of smell. The only thing he can taste now is sweet, salty, or umami. He can feel heat on his tongue. I like to tell people when he's eating ice cream, if he shuts his eyes, he can tell you it's cold. He can tell you it's sweet, but he can't tell you what flavor it is that he's eating because it all tastes the same to him. So superficial siderosis, the damage really impacts every part of people's lives. We started out, he would have to use a cane at first to walk. And we did a lot of hiking back then, and he would have to use 2 walking poles for balance. Eventually, the cane was no longer helping, so he moved to a walker, just a wheeled walker with a little seat on it, and he could put his little bag on it, and that would help him get around. And about, I would say, a year and a half ago, he was diagnosed in 2014. The walker really was beginning to not help. And all of 2003, we made 9 trips to the emergency room with serious head injuries and CT scans looking for any kind of damage where he hit his head. So in January of last year, the decision was made by his healthcare providers that he needed to stop walking, and he is a permanent wheelchair user now.
Wow.
So that's how bad the cerebellum becomes involved in this. The tissue on the surface and the hemosiderin actually enters into the tissue. We've seen slides of it. And the cerebellum controls balance, and the eighth cranial nerve is really susceptible to damage. So not only does it affect your hearing, but it's almost like a two-nerve section. It also takes care of your vestibular system. So for him, it's like a gyroscope. His gyroscope no longer works. If he tries to stand, he tumbles over. A couple days ago, he was sitting on the bed trying to take his t-shirt off to get ready for bed, and he just fell over. Just sitting from a seated position, just the act of raising his arms over his head to take his t-shirt off, he fell over. It just, his world is constantly spinning.
Mhm.
Um, Now, we're looking at ways to slow the progression down, and we're looking at ways both. We know surgery is the best way to stop an active bleed from adding fresh blood products, but 50% of the patients either can't have their bleed located or they can't get it stopped. So the question became, how do you stop the blood from infiltrating and slow down the damage? So our head of our medical advisory and scientific board, Dr. Michael Levy, was a resident at Johns Hopkins years ago during his residency. And a man came in, he was 48 years old. And when he was looking over his history, he saw that he was in an auto accident when he was 3. And so it was an acute trauma. And so that's quite a gap of years, 3 years old to 48 years old. But the man was suffering from balance issues, hearing problem, just the whole myriad of things. And so there's a specialized type of imaging, SWI, that is very sensitive to seeing iron deposits on the brain. Dr. Levy noticed the man had significant iron deposits on his brain. So he thought, what if I try a chelator to try and remove the iron? Will this slow down his progression? So they put him on a chelator for 18 months. Now, this was a hard thing to do because most chelators are created to remove iron from the bloodstream. And we have to get a chelator into the spinal fluid through the blood-brain barrier. And the blood-brain barrier is well known for it doesn't want to let anything in. So he found one chelator out there that would cross the blood-brain barrier. He put the man on it for 18 months, and he had pretty good success. So he wrote a case study about the man and presented it to the FDA and got permission to start a 10-person pilot trial on this chelator. This went on, and that went into a 30-patient pilot or trial. And so right now, this chelator, we have off-label permission to use it on patients, but it's very expensive because it's off-label and a Tier 5 drug. Health insurances fight tooth and nail. People have to make appeals 2, 3, 4 times to try and get it to pay for it. And then it doesn't work on everybody. Some people, because we are, as superficial siderosis patients, don't suffer from iron overload in the bloodstream, which is what this medication is intended for. It's stripping the iron out of their whole body. So some people's bodies just can't tolerate that. So you're kind of up in the air there. What we do now is, number one, the first course of action is surgery. If you have an active bleed or you suspect, we need your doctor to look for it and see if it's possible to stop it. that will slow down the progression, but the progression will continue with the existing iron there. Secondly, we hope, and this is something that each individual patient has to choose if the chelator is for them. You've got to look at cost. You've got to look at can you take it physically. But we know that it helps. My husband had an active bleed from the 90s when he had a tumor removed at C2, C3 until 2021. And he was diagnosed in 2014 and put on the chelator then. And his symptoms stayed very level. There wasn't a lot of progression. I mean, it did progress. It was very slow, but we lived our life. We went camping, we went places, we traveled, we did things until COVID hit. And because the chelator has to be so regulated, constant blood tests to make sure you're not becoming anemic. When they took him off the chelator for that year, and then they canceled his surgery for the active bleed, it was kind of a perfect storm for him. And he ended up after 1 year with a 25% increase in iron over his brain. And they finally did the surgery in 21, but by then the damage was done and his body has never been able to recover from that. And so the last year or so has been extremely rapid progression for him. Early detection is key on this. This is an acquired disorder. You're not born with it. You either have had a traumatic injury, car accident, our servicemen, IEDs, explosions. My husband had a tumor removed right here at the base of his neck. Some people have cysts growing on their spinal cords that cause slow bleeds, and there is a direct connection between people with Marfan's. They are very susceptible to superficial siderosis. So we're learning who is at risk. It's very important after you've had some sort of major trauma or surgery for your doctor to look for this, in one of your 6-month follow-up, send you for an MRI, make sure everything's clear, make sure your body has cleared this iron. Early diagnosis, I would say, is important because some people go 30 to 40 years with this slow bleed before it's ever discovered. And by the time their doctors figure out what it is they have, the damage is done. The damage to the body cannot be reversed. Whatever's done is done. So by the time they wait, it's like they wait too long. Now, we have one story. Reese Holmes is our director in the UK. And at one point, Reese was in a wheelchair. And he was put on the chelator. And he was put on an antioxidant cocktail mix. And they started him on specialized vestibular therapy. And Reese is out of the wheelchair and driving again and leading an active life. Now, he's lost his hearing. He had a cochlear implant put in, but it shows the importance of catching it early before too much damage is done to the body and your body is just overwhelmed. There are 3 variants of superficial siderosis. Everybody calls it SS or superficial siderosis, but there's really 3 variants. One is cortical superficial siderosis. And that happens in the front area of the brain, the top, this part here. And it's caused by little tiny microbleeds. And it's really attributed to aging process and a few other things. They find it in Alzheimer's patients. They're not going to have the symptoms that the other 2 varieties are going to have. Theirs are going to be more memory problems, headaches, things associated like that. My husband has what's called infrafrontal superficial siderosis type 1 classical. And that is really the most devastating. This is when blood infiltrates into the spinal fluid, as I was talking about, and it circulates, which means it just goes everywhere in your body. Type 2 is from a traumatic incident. If you have an accident, a head trauma, and you just have a massive acute bleed in one area of your brain, the hemosiderin is only going to be in that one area. It's not going to circulate through your system. So your symptoms are going to be limited to the area of the brain where the hemosiderin is located. You may have balance problems if it's the back of your head, but you won't lose your hearing. So it's really important that doctors learn how to differentiate between the three types. We get so many patients contacting us saying, my doctor said I don't have anything to worry about. It's not going to do any problem. Your body's going to, slough away the blood. And then 5 years later, they're back and they're in a wheelchair. So this is where education comes in. It's so important. Radiologists are often the first ones to note it in a report, but they never say which type of superficial siderosis it is. Doctors, it's really hard to find a neurologist that's knowledgeable. People will go to 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. Nobody wants to take the case because they don't understand it. So many systems become involved and damaged that it really takes a multidisciplinary team approach to care for this. Your neurologist will tell you which specialties you need to go see. At one point, my husband saw 18 different specialties. He's come down a little bit from that number, but at the high point, it was 18 specialists. It's really important to get one doctor that can coordinate all of this care, though. Make sure everybody's checking the medications, making sure what one person prescribes, doesn't counteract with what somebody else is doing. It's just a never-ending travel trip, I guess, always on the road to another doctor.
That's one of the things I do. I'm a caregiver, and so I a lot of times will recommend that people take their medications into a pharmacy to have them checked out, because a lot of people will make mistakes. So the pharmacies actually know more about the medications because that's what they go to.
Right. Well, I think that for one thing, it's really hard. The chelation's hard on a person's body. You really have to be careful. I guess we recommend a diet regimen. It's not actually a diet regimen, but a dosing schedule, because SS patients don't have an overload of iron in their system. We really recommend they take their chelator for 5 days, and then they go off of it for 2 days. And during those 2 days, we want them to eat all the high iron-rich foods that they can to iron load, to keep their body in check and keep them from becoming anemic. So it's kind of a balancing act. We recommend the MIND diet to patients. It's really high in iron, but it's a lot of non-heme iron. We recommend that people don't eat a lot of red meat during the 5 days that they're dosing if they're on the chelator, because especially if you have motility problems in the gut, it could take 3 or 4 days for that meat to digest and get out of there. And if you're taking a chelator, it takes 7 minutes to dissolve and get in your spinal fluid, and it reaches its peak in 2 hours. So if you're eating red meat or something with a lot of iron in it, then your chelator is going to remove the iron from your bloodstream, and there won't really be anything left to go across into your brain. So you've kind of wasted your dose.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a juggling act. You have to be mindful of how you eat, when you eat, and what you're eating. We're working with several antioxidants now. Either people that are on the chelator are taking them too, to see if the two of them together will help enhance and speed up the iron removal process, or if people can just take them that can't take the chelator for whatever reason, to help slow the progression that way. It won't be as fast or work as well, but it helps some. We've had some pretty good success stories with that so far.
Let's see. So you mentioned some of the symptoms of it. How does SS differ? Okay, so we went through the part 2. So, and then we talked about chelation also. What dietary changes or restrictions are typically recommended for patients under chelation therapy?
Well, like I said, we really want you to eat a low iron, if you eat meat, to stick to turkey and fish, chicken during the week when you're on your chelator. We want you to leave a 2-hour window between the time that you eat and you take your medication. My husband used to take his medication at 5 o'clock in the morning, wake up, then he'd have his breakfast at 7. Then he would take it again in the afternoon, 2 hours before dinner. So it was out of his system before he ate. That way, we knew he was getting the full effect of it.
Right.
You know,
So does he have a tolerance for iron, or is there? I mean, is there a certain amount of iron he can have, or is there just
well,
all?
my husband's not on the chelator anymore, but when he was, his blood test always showed he was always on the verge of being anemic. I mean, it was just the way it was. I really tried hard to load him up on the weekends when he would rotate off his dose. But it's really just a matter of the individual system, how you tolerate it, how much iron you need. We know women are going to need more iron than men. If you don't eat meat and you're a vegan or vegetarian, that makes a whole other type of, problem there. Making sure that you get enough non-heme iron is really hard. You need to learn how to combine foods, eating vitamin C helps the absorption of iron. So, do you eat your iron foods on the weekends and then drink, or take vitamin C? It's just a juggling act. We have a section on the website that lines out the mind diet and the schedule for eating, so people can actually download a PDF off the website and keep it in their kitchen so they can have a handy reference on how to go about attacking their diet and what to do, best case scenario.
So if somebody is vegan, how would they get iron?
Well, the mind diet is good for a fact that you're going to eat a lot of beans, black beans, different types of things with high iron. Um, Spinach has a lot of iron. I'd have to read up on the website to see about the vegan. I know that we went over vegan lifestyles. Right now, there are so many vegan food companies out that have come out now that have, supplements in them. It's amazing. 5 years ago, all these brands weren't out there. So I'm going to guess that you could probably get something. The biggest thing is to stay away from enriched foods. Uh, Commercial cereals are always high in iron. Commercial breads, high in iron. Anything with flour is iron enriched. So we had a tendency to go organic and iron free during the week. It's really hard to eat off the shelf of a grocery store and keep your iron low, as somebody with thalassemia will tell you, or any of those diseases. Where they have iron overload. That's really a good place to start too. During the 5 days you're dosing, is maybe look up a thalassemia or hemochromatosis diet. But on the weekends, it's really important to iron load.
Does he have a nutritionist?
He does still, yes. We see her twice a year, and then I can call her if I need to. My husband's problem now is protein. He doesn't eat a lot, so we have to really give him things with high protein in it.
So how does this help help him manage the condition?
Pardon me?
How does the nutritionist help him manage his condition, and why is it important?
Well, when he was on the chelator, we were always very strict about the 5 days on and 2 days off. And, a nutritionist just makes sure that you're getting the right vitamins. A chelator will remove other things besides iron from your system, zinc. You can become zinc deficient. It's just a really a myriad of problems. A chelator is very hard on the body. It really is. So, um, I would just say that a nutritionist would help you plan your diet out, especially if you need help planning your menus out with recipes, things to cook, so you can learn how to combine foods that are really good and high in uh, fiber and iron and all the things you need. During the week, it's interesting to note that things with purple in them are low iron, like eggplant. Eggplant skins are good for the low diet portion of the week. Um, I would think that mm, I really don't know about the vegan part though. I would really have to research that a little bit more. I really couldn't offer any suggestion on how to iron load as a vegan, other than the beans and the things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Lentils, any kind of legume that has high iron in it.
Mm-hmm. Um, see, are there any are there any promising developments or alternative therapies that can currently being researched?
Well, like as I said before, we're using several antioxidants to combat oxidative stress and to enhance the chelator. Uh, Dr. Levy is currently using IP6, which is an over-the-counter antioxidant available in any store, with all his patients that are on the chelator and not, both of them. He suggests it to everybody. We're working with curcumin, turmeric, um, sulforaphane. There's just a whole host of antioxidants available to try. Uh, I believe Reese also takes green tea.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, I'm not sure actually as a tea, I believe as a supplement, because I really think that you would have to drink too much tea itself to actually get any kind of therapeutic benefit. I believe that, you need to get something from the health food store
Mm-hmm.
on the green tea. But he has been very steady, and everybody that's really been on the antioxidant combination has remained very steady. That is one of our goals, is to make sure people can enjoy a quality of life. We may not be able to cure anybody, but we want to make sure that they're still able to enjoy life. Quality of life is the key. It's the best goal that we can have. If you can enjoy an active life, enjoy your family and your friends, and still do things, that's all you can ask for.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So, see what inspired you? What inspired the creation of Superficial Siderosis Research Alliance?
well, that's an interesting story. My husband started having symptoms in 2003, and I used to complain. Every year we'd go to a specialist, every year we'd have more tests. They never could figure out what was wrong with him. And in 2014, we had gone to our third ENT, and he was about to send us to another specialist. We live in Texas, in East Texas, and he was going to send us to Dallas. And at the last minute, he decided to send us for a updated MRI to rule out if there was a brain tumor or something. So we went and had an MRI done. And the day before we were going to go see the neurosurgeon to have him look over the MRI, my husband popped a disc into his laptop and he read it and he said, "Do you know what this superficial siderosis is?" And I said, "No." And I kind of Googled it like everybody does. We all run to Dr. Google. And there was hardly anything online at all, nothing. And I panicked because what I did read online sounded horrific. And so once we had the diagnosis confirmed, I thought, well, I'm going to make a little website so I can start collecting information and writing little posts that people that we knew could just go on there and read what was going on with Gary. So that's what I did. And I would find every kind of case study I could find, anything about nutrition, anything that I could get my hands on that had to do with superficial siderosis, I would upload to this little site. And one day I got an email from a man called Kyle Dempsey. And Kyle said, I was going through your website, Living with SS. He said, who are you? And so we ended up chatting on the phone. And we both attended the Rare Disease Conference in Washington, D.C. in 2019. And we met and we sat down and we had a long discussion over what we needed. There was no research. Dr. Levy was the only doctor in the US that was doing anything about it. And he was basically funding research out of his own pocket with a little bit of help from the drug company. I mean, it was just, he had to finish paying for that one study all by himself. So we thought, it would be a really good idea if we had an organization, and we attended all the meetings in Washington. We saw all the rare disease organizations. We saw all the volunteers. We saw how active they were, how they were advocating. We thought, we need to do this. There's got to be other SS patients out there. So he went home to Wisconsin, and I worked from Texas. And we just made a decision to found it. He put together a board of directors. He got everything started. We got approved. We're a registered nonprofit with the federal government through the state of Wisconsin. And we just started posting things on social media. We got Dr. Levy involved, and it's kind of blossomed there. So we've been September of 2019 when we first kicked off. So it's been almost 5 years, not quite. But we've made terrific strides. Other organizations have told us that they're impressed by all the things that we have managed to accomplish in this short time. We started a patient registry where SS patients from around the world can go and register. That way, we send out questionnaires, we keep track of symptom progression, and that way we have a way to contact people. We have a social media presence. We have a private Facebook group, plus our SSRA page, where people can ask questions that's private. Nobody else will see it. And that helps a lot. We get a lot of people that email us. I used to get an email, once every 4 or 5 months. Now we get emails 2 or 3 times a week. The amount of patients. In 2014, when Gary was diagnosed, there were only 100 reported case studies of superficial siderosis in the entire US. And as of last year, we have over 500 documented cases in the US. And in the UK, the number per population is even more, to the point where the UK, it might not be an ultra rare disease in the UK anymore. They're finding increasing numbers over there. As I said before, Reese Holmes is my counterpart over there. He's put together a group of people, volunteers, who are going to be trustees, and we are in the process of applying to have a recognized subsidiary over there as a nonprofit in the UK. And once that's completed, then we'll move on to our group of volunteers in Australia. So we are Kyle's vision of alliance, a true alliance from around the world, is coming together for us. And we're especially proud because This is all volunteer run. We have no paid employees. We just contribute our time and our efforts on our own. We're always looking for volunteers. And we're doing this out of a labor of love for the people that we love. And I once asked Gary if he was, worried about what would happen to him and keeping on doing this. And he said, no, because he really wants the people that come after us to have a better chance than he did. The old timers are kind of falling off one at a time. We're losing people now. Over the last couple of years, we're really missing people that we've come to know and love over the few years. And it's a hard thing to say goodbye to them. It really is. So we're hoping that, people are being diagnosed with this. They're 20 years old. They're, kids now, all of a sudden, a few of them. So it's just really, it feels important that we really can complete our mission and help their quality of life.
Let's see. Can you share some examples of SSRA's research initiatives and how they are advancing understanding and treatment of understanding and treatment options of SSRA?
Well, we have a medical advisory board, as I said. It's headed by Dr. Michael Levy. He's currently at Massachusetts General Hospital. He moved there from Johns Hopkins, and he started the only superficial siderosis clinic and laboratory in the U.S. He does research and he sees clinical care patients there. Right now, he has, I believe, over 150, 200 patients that he sees. He will collaborate with anybody's doctor also if they call him and contact him. We meet quarterly with a group. We have several researchers over in the UK. We have Dr. Levy, and I represent the caregivers portion and the SSRA, and Reese attends the meetings as a patient because we feel it's important that the caregivers and families and patients have input into the research. We want, too many times, research is driven by who funds it, and they're not really looking at the goals and priorities of the patients themselves. So we like to consider our research patient-centric. We send out surveys. What do you want us to look at? What do you need? What do you want? Well, the answer is really simple. Everybody wants to feel better. Everybody wants to, I don't want to feel so bad. So that's why we kind of shifted our goal. While everybody says we're always looking for a cure, but really what we're looking for is a better quality of life. Can we slow it down enough to where you could live the rest of your lifetime out and it really not be a bother? Maybe it's possible. I don't know. We're working on the antioxidants. We're working on ways to better locate bleeds and find them. Right now, there is a specialized equipment that will find a bleed, but it's only available in 3 hospitals across the United States. One in the West Coast, Cedars-Sinai, at Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, and at Massachusetts General on the East Coast. And if you have to travel to have your bleed found and have the surgery to have it repaired, the expense, will your insurance cover it? It's just out of reach of most people. Sometimes you're like my husband, you just go to a neurosurgeon and he looks at your scans and he says, okay, I have an idea where I think it is. And you have to put your trust in the neurosurgeon to say, okay, let's get this fixed. We've had a lot of stories of people that have had blood patches or surgery and the bleed's still there. It didn't fix. So we need a better way there. And we need to find better chelators that are less expensive. We've found other chelators that are actually better, but they're even more expensive than the one we're using now. It's out of a price range or people can't afford it. When a lot of people are living on retirement income or they've had to stop working, so they're only living on one income. it just prices people out of the market. So we're looking for better chelators. And then the antioxidants.
What is the average cost of a chelator?
It depends on insurance. I learned this by talking to different insurance companies. Every insurance company negotiates their own price for medications. So while you may have Blue Cross Blue Shield and somebody else may have United Healthcare, they're going to pay different costs. We have some people that pay $50 a month out of pocket. Whereas when we were on private insurance, we were paying $1,500 a month, every month out of pocket for it. And my husband had to stop working. He had to stop working in January of 2015, and we went without an income into our household for 7 months, paying for everything. We paid for his insurance, we paid for his medication, and we just, survived on our own, waiting. So
income.
Pardon me?
How do you survive without an income?
Our savings. We lived off our savings. So it's just it's a devastating disorder. I mean, people that I just gave a talk to the Rare Disease Advisory Council of Colorado on applying for Social Security disability for rare disease patients because we suffer special circumstances. And it's extraordinary how many people apply without the proper documentation, and they don't understand why they can't get approved. It's really a long process normally, unless you have if you have everything that you need when you apply, it can be a very short process. When Gary went on disability, I applied and I went up there and this is before we did the online, I stood over the lady's shoulder and made her type everything in as I had written it, word for word. And this is important because the Social Security office uses an algorithm to pull out the applications that need to go to quick determination. And it's all done by computer. A human eye never sees the application. So you need to get the correct wording in. From the time she hit the upload button and sent our application in until I got the letter in the mail that said he had been approved for disability was 27 days. But then you wait 7 months. And then you wait 2 years for healthcare insurance. So you're still on your own there. So rare disease patients have a lot of hurdles to jump through, not only with their disease and clinical care and taking care of themselves, but all those other areas that nobody ever thinks about, just living day to day, paying the bills, I found out after all this went on that my husband was eligible for VA disability, and VA healthcare. So we are well taken care of now. And I appreciate everything that everybody has ever done for us. It's just, I really don't know how some of these people are at their wits' ends. They've used up all their savings and they've used up, everything. So it's a hard thing. I got completely off of the research part, but it's
does the cost of it vary from state to state also?
Yes, it does. Like I said, that's got to do with insurance. Some insurances are very good about paying for it. Some people are on Medicare and Medicaid combination. They do better. Some people, like I said, it just depends on where you are and what your insurance will pay on it. The VA pharmacist told me that this chelator to the VA wholesale is $9,000 a bottle for a 100-count bottle. So, that tells you, it's just we need something better.
Yeah. So advocacy is a big part of the SSRA work. SSRA's work. How does the organization support patients and the families on a global scale?
Well, advocacy is essential for raising awareness and securing funding.
Mhm.
We work to educate healthcare providers. On the website, we have a very limited physician directory of physicians that are familiar with SS. We connect patients with doctors. I get requests all the time for people, do you have a doctor in this state? No, we don't. It's hard to find a doctor. Healthcare policies, it's just a hard thing to I rare disease coalitions can help, but on a local level, when you're faced with all this stuff, I mean, the most we can do is we can connect you with a doctor if we can help you find one. We can help your doctor if you have one and he's unfamiliar with it, connect him with the specialist in Boston, in Massachusetts General. Um, and we have the Facebook group where we spend a lot of time. I don't, but we have other volunteers that spend a lot of time answering questions and fears and help and suggestions. And it's amazing when you get a group of people together, how much they help each other.
Mhm.
They're willing to share information. Um, we have had meetings with insurance companies and the chelation manufacturers and everything else trying to work to bring the cost down. And it's just been a brick wall. We've just hit the wall and they're just not interested. I think the problem is if we were a larger population, rare
Mhm.
disease,
Yeah.
it's hard to get them excited when, you've got 500 patients in the US, maybe only half of them can take the chelator. It doesn't give them a lot of incentive to help out. Uh,
Well, the
but we
thing is,
have hope.
yeah, there
They're
are a lot of rare disease patients, but individually, there's not that many. But
right.
you think about it, there's over 10,000 rare conditions.
Yes. And that's why it's important that we belong to these larger organizations. NORD, we're a member of NORD, and the rare disease we go to. I haven't been in a couple of years, but Kyle attends more regularly. We go to Rare Disease Week in Washington, D.C. We talk to our local legislators. I have had several uh, video meetings with our local congressional leaders trying to support pharmaceutical costs. And as a group, we're much better together than just on our own. The larger voice is heard more, I
Mhm.
think. Um, Locally, for our people, we provide online educational material. Of course, we have 3 websites. We have one that we consider a digital magazine. That's what Living with SS kind of morphed into. Uh,
Mhm.
Personal stories from patients that they write, uh, copies of studies that they can download, our physician directory, and then uh, guides on every symptom, on how to help it, what to do, vestibular therapy. We provide access to a phone app where people can do vestibular therapy in their home. We produce medical alert cards for people to put in their wallet. So if they're in the emergency room, they can pull it out and show the doctor, hey, I have this. This is what it's called. You need to watch for this, this, and this with me.
Mhm.
We produce brochures. We're just updating a new brochure will be coming out this year. I think our last one was produced in 2021. So, and then, as I said before, I have a guide on the website for applying for Social Security disability, step by step, got worksheets on it. People can download a copy of it and sit there and fill it out so they can be prepared if they need to go that route.
Mhm.
There's just a lot of little pieces that come together.
Mhm.
And of course, we are always looking for people to volunteer to write for our websites, write blog posts on their personal stories. It's just a never-ending search for volunteers, I guess you would say.
Mhm. Okay, we kind of got into this just now. Funding for rare disease research is notoriously difficult. How is the SSRA? How does the SSRA challenge? This? How does the SSRA address this challenge, and how can listeners help?
Well, funding for rare disease is limited. There are so many rare conditions competing for grants out there, federal grants especially. We've applied for a couple. Grant reviewers really don't understand the complexities of superficial siderosis, so they have expectations that really are not reasonable for us. You can't have a large cohort for your study when you can only gather, 30 people. And then if you gather 30 people for a study, then they poo-poo the results because, oh, you need 400 or 500 people, Well, that doesn't work with rare diseases. Some studies, they do with one person. And so I think that the people that review those type of applications, they need to be more in tune to the rare disease population and the problems that we are up against. We are going to private funding areas now, having much better luck than we are with federal grants. We are approved. We can get federal grants. So far, we haven't been able to win one yet. We've made several applications. We fundraise at a grassroots level. Fundraising has been kind of down the last couple years for us. And it's just because everything's tight for everybody. I mean, we understand that people don't have a lot of money, but um, we have a few angel donors that are very generous. We have run a trail run every year as a fundraiser. That just happened in September. And we're coming up on Giving Tuesday. And so we'll start a fundraising campaign very shortly for Giving Tuesday. And we try to be fiscally responsible with the money. Like I said, we don't have any paid employees. We're very open. We publish all of our tax returns and our budget. Everything is online on our website. If you want to know how we're spending our money, anybody can go there and look and see. We're wide open that way. Research, I think once we break that first time of a large study, right now we're up for funding for a fairly large study to see if we can get our chelator be considered not off-label with the FDA. And to do that, we have to do a double-blind study.
Mhm.
So fingers crossed, we're very close there. That things are going to come through for us. Public donations are just the way we stay, we stay focused. Partnerships with our medical advisors, they've opened the door for other specialists. Their networks have become our networks. Sometimes we just download studies off the internet and then we just email people. I mean, researchers, things like that. We're like, hey, would you like to collaborate? It's the only way. You cannot do this and not be proactive. You have to get out there, reach out to people. In June of this year, we will be hosting our first Superficial Siderosis Symposium at Harvard. We're inviting speakers. There'll be people coming in from the UK and the United States. We'll have, we hope, people from neurosurgery, vestibular rehabilitation, we're going to have a hematologist to go over how to care for somebody, what a doctor needs to do to oversee somebody on chelation. We'll have Dr. Levy will be there explaining hows and whys. We just have a whole group. It'll be open to patients and family one day and doctors, and then we'll have another half day for medical research where all of our research will get together face to face from all these countries and sit down and discuss where we are at and where we want to go.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exciting. This will be the first time ever.
Yeah. See, what drew you personally to this work, and what has been the most rewarding experience with the SSRA?
Well, I think that what drew me, of course, was my husband. I wanted to make him better. Um, we thought we could make him better. But research takes a really long time, and this disease is not, I would say, easy in the later stages. And my husband has progressed into what is now referred to as the point of no return. He's gone off his chelator, and we're just letting it progress. Uh, we still have good days, we love being together.
Mm-hmm.
But we want to make it better for everybody else. And I think the thing that got me, I'm gonna read a little thing right here.
Mm-hmm.
I used to write on a regular basis about his treatment journey and just our journey through everyday life dealing with SS. And it got to a point last year where I thought I need to stop, and let somebody younger and more exuberant take over on the keeping the blog posts up. So I wrote a farewell blog, and I wrote, I must admit I am exhausted. This journey has taken a toll on both of us in ways that we could never have anticipated. While I continue to write medical related articles, this will be my last post on our personal journey. As we enter this stage of Gary's progression, he always makes sure that I know he's not ready to give up. And for this, I'm grateful. I'm not ready either. We
Yeah.
got so many responses.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea how many people we had touched. So,
Um, how do you balance research, patient advocacy, and outreach in your roles as vice president?
well, as a vice president, I'm a voting member of the board of directors.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I attend the board meetings and I vote on how we run it. As the executive director, I kind of like to look at myself as the person who keeps the wheels on the bus. I just kind of oversee all of our volunteers, and they are absolutely wonderful. Um, I'm trying not to get in their way. I want them to feel like they can make decisions and come up with ideas and know that we appreciate it. Um, it's time for a younger group to take charge, and they're doing a great job. But Kyle and I are there still steering the way because it's important to us. This is our baby. Um, Kyle has done a wonderful job. He and his wife founded this organization, and from day one, we have made sure that we are there for everybody. We try.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just this is a hard disease. It is really hard.
Yeah. See, what do you hope the SSRA will achieve in the next 5 to 10 years?
I'm hoping that we come up with a faster way to reduce the iron and oxidative stress. That's my main goal. If we could do it, takes so long now. Some people are on this chelator for 10, 15 years, and still, after a while, your body just gets exhausted. So something faster, something that works better, some way to speed the process along, and some way to enhance the neuroprotective qualities of the antioxidants, because they really are making a difference in some people. That's what's important. Uh, do we want to cure this? I don't know that we'll ever be able to cure it, but maybe once we get into the genetics part of it, we can figure out why it happens. So maybe we'd be able to stop it from happening in anybody else. Now that's a good goal.
Yeah.
So, there are a lot of areas. We're looking into biomarkers. We haven't started into genetics yet, but, we're in discussions about that. The UK researchers feel like there is a genetic component to this that needs to be found.
Mhm.
And so that's probably on the table for our next serious discussion.
Um, for listeners who suspect that they or a loved one have SS, what advice would you give about seeking a diagnosis and care?
First off, you need to have an imaging done that definitively shows whether there's iron on the brain and where it's located. Uh, it can be ordered by a primary care physician. It doesn't even have to be a neurologist. Um, Once you have this imaging, a radiologist can definitively determine it's that simple. A radiologist can say SS is present in this brain or spine. Once that is done and enhanced, you need to find out what type of SS you have. Now, that's harder to do because a lot of times you go to a neurologist and you can't get in for 6 months, or you can't find one that will accept your case once they find out what it is. You need to keep going and find a doctor. Don't just settle for somebody that will give you a little bit of their time. Find somebody that's interested in your case. Like we said, Dr. Levy will consult with any neurologist in the United States or the world. He's consulted with any physician that gets in contact with him. In my husband's case, we couldn't get a neurologist for a long time. His general practitioner put us in touch with a hematologist who oversaw chelation therapy before we even had a neurologist.
Mhm.
So sometimes you have to go around the box, and start the ball rolling on your own. Don't wait. Um, if you have ISS type 1 or even ISS type 2, then you need to be proactive about getting a healthcare provider that's willing to work with you. Uh, Too many people are told, it's not a big deal. It's going to go away. It won't go away. It'll just get worse over years. So, um, that's what I would say that my advice is don't settle. Don't settle for them to tell you there's nothing to be done or it's okay, because it's not okay.
Mhm. Um, how can people connect with the SSRA and get involved in supporting your mission?
We have a Facebook page, of course, as everybody does, and a group. We have a public page, and the private group is we try to keep it to patients and caregivers only, direct family. That way, people can have a safe space to ask questions without worrying about who's in there reading what they wrote. We have 3 websites. Patients can sign up at superficialsiderosis.org for the patient registry. We have the SSRA website, which is ssra.livingwithss.com. That is the organization website. And then we have the original livingwithss.com. And they can get a hold of us from any of those sites. And you can send us a message on Facebook. You can send us a message on Instagram. We're on X. We'll respond. Somebody will respond.
Mhm. Um, let's see. Is there a message you'd like to share with patients living with superficial siderosis uh, and their families?
I think that not everybody's on social media. A lot of people don't get on. But I want everybody to know that they're not alone. They really aren't. There are more people in the U.S. than you could possibly imagine. So we are a small group, but we are a strong group.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it. Continue to have hope, because even at this point, we still have hope. We do.
Yeah.
You can't give up.
Nope. Let's see. Thank you for listening to this episode of Our Connection. A big thank you to Rori for the invaluable insights and the amazing work being done at the Superficial Siderosis. To learn more, to support the mission, visit SSRA livingwithss.org. Before we go, here is a few reminders. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and my podcast. The YouTube channel is Rare Chef. Podcast is Rare Connection. The reviews are also always welcome. If you are listening to the audio version, you can text me via the link in the show notes. I'd love to connect and hear from you. Join the Rare Connection Facebook page and group in the to engage in our growing community, and follow us on X, formerly Twitter, and stay updated. I'm also actively seeking sponsors for the podcast. If you or your organization would like to support mission, let's connect. For medical professionals, I'm interested in collaborating for the continuing education, to offer continuing education credits for listening to the podcast. You can contact me at jball@rareconnection.org. Additionally, I'm also looking for board members. I'm trying to turn Rare Connection into a nonprofit. As we grow, this is a volunteer opportunity that can be done virtually anywhere. But I ask for a 1-year commitment. If you're willing to learn about rare conditions and have public speaking experience, leadership experience, and fundraising experience, I'd love to hear from you. Lastly, if you or someone you know is struggling, please remember that help is available. In the U.S., you can call or text 988 for the Suicide Crisis Lifeline, or visit 988lifeline.org. You are not alone. Thank you for being part of our connection community, and together we are amplifying voices and making a difference. Don't forget to share this episode and stay tuned for more impactful stories. Until next time, take care. Thanks.